let's talk about the next very common problem that we come across in case interviews. And this one is all about growing revenue. So when we talk about growing revenue, an example of a case prompt that we might get is something like, hey, our client has approached us and they have this target to grow revenue by 50% over the next 3 years. Can you suggest how we can go about doing that? Or maybe something else would be like, hey, our client has seen declining revenue growth or maybe even declining revenues. They want us to figure out what's driving this and how we can turn this around. So whenever it comes to revenue, just the top line and not profitability, this framework would be more appropriate. And again, this is quite a big framework, so let me first walk through it and then we can talk about how we can use this in a more specific way if appropriate. So when we look at revenue, simplest split is to look at organic versus inorganic. Organic revenue growth basically means any revenue growth that is purely by growing your own company. And inorganic conversely means any revenue growth for which you are leveraging on another company. So a pretty distinct split here. Organic usually has a lot of topics that we can talk about, and this is where you might spend a lot of time talking. So let's look into organic and dive into that. So we can split it into existing segments and new segments. When we talk about existing segments, I'm referring to your current products, your current customers, and your current geographies. So anything that you're currently doing, this is all existing segments. And when we subdivide it, this is just going to be your typical price times volume analysis. So if you recall, in the profitability framework, we have a revenue component that subdivides into price and volume. It's going to be the same sort of points that you're covering, so it's going to look very similar here. Now moving on to new segments, this is going to be a really interesting discussion most of the time when we're talking about revenue growth. So it's worthwhile diving into this as you walk through the case. So new segments, we can think of them in two ways. One is new products, and the second is new customers. Now, new products, we can further look at it in two lenses. First one is cross-selling, upselling, and complements. So this is basically if I already am producing some kind of products or some kind of services, can I sell my existing customers these new products? Would they be persuaded to buy more stuff from me? So cross-selling would be, bundling opportunities. If something goes well together, can they be persuaded to add on that extra thing? Upselling basically is the idea of switching up, right? So if they're buying a basic package, can they be persuaded to pay more for a premium thing? Or if they're buying a no-frills package, can they be persuaded to add on additional components to that package? So that's cross-selling and upselling. Complements is kind of an overlapping idea that's quite similar to cross-selling, so we're not going to dive into it too much. The next thing within new products is adjacencies. So maybe you are producing, for example, let's say you're a yoga studio and you're producing this simple package classes, right? What could be adjacent to yoga? Maybe it's mindfulness, maybe it's stress relief, maybe it's massage therapy. So these are spaces which, you might not currently be playing in, but based on your current business offering, based on your current product offering, maybe there's a natural fit for your business to expand into it. So this is what we would call adjacencies. So slightly different concept from just pushing new products to your existing customers. So let's step back and now we look at the other part of new segments, which is new customers. So for this one, we are looking all about segmentation, right? So the first point, segmentation, we can look at it from, for example, age, gender, location in the country, maybe which neighborhood, which district you're covering, so catchment area. So a lot of different ways that you can try to segment your customers and think about what customers you're currently doing well with and what you currently don't have much exposure to. So this is new segments. Second point on geographies, this is kind of a catch-all. So if you're operating in the US, can we expand to other growth markets, for example? So these 2 points talk about how do we reach out to new customers segments that we are not currently dealing with. The next 2 points, referrals and marketing, talk about new strategies to capture customers regardless of what their segmentation is. So referral bonuses, referral schemes, word of mouth, marketing, all these are campaigns that you can run to increase your new customer acquisition. This could be targeted by segment, these could be general as well. So these are all strategies for acquiring new customers. And then finally, let's step all the way back and look at the inorganic side of things. Basically, a couple of limited options here. There's not too much to talk about. Typical options here would be your joint ventures, acquisitions, and franchising model. So these are usually kind of like further out ideas that, might be worth mentioning, but depending on how interesting it is to the interviewer, you might not spend much time, if at all, covering this. All right, so that covers our revenue framework. And as you can see, it's a really comprehensive framework. It covers a lot of things. So the next step in knowing how to apply this framework is really, again, go back to your clarifying questions and ask the interviewer things around your client's scope, right? How do they feel like they should approach these objectives? Do they have any limitations? Do they have any preferences? So for example, if you find out that your client is only keen to grow existing business, then you know that the inorganic side of the issue tree is not so relevant, and you know that the new segment side of the issue tree is also not too relevant. So that's an example of how you can use clarifying questions to better inform your framework. And at the end of the day, just use what is necessary for the case interview, right? We have a lot of ideas here. You shouldn't feel like you need to put everything on the paper. So make sure that you always customize your framework.